24 News.
How do you get your news? How do you know what sources to trust? And to paint a clear picture of the entire story, you need a breakdown of the constant stream of events, top stories, expert analysts, and the best journalists bringing you real voices on the ground. We're breaking it all down on The Rundown. Get the facts, stay informed, and be a voice of reason for the Middle East.
Introducing the brand new i24 News Video On Demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions, and expert commentary, all at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News Video On Demand app today.
Hello and welcome to Middle East Now. These are tonight's top stories. Two foreign ministers, one Secretary of State, from Riyadh and Rabat all the way to D.C., a day of diplomacy. Rearming or disarming, what's the deal with Hezbollah? And bracing to the Hajj, why Saudi Arabia is not going to let everyone in. We begin in Washington today, where the Saudi foreign minister is in town. And yes, there is a whole lot at stake there, from the talks with Iran, through the no talks on Gaza, to the talks on President Trump's future visit in the kingdom. So let's say hello to i24 News senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim. Hello, hello, Mike. So what's on the agenda, and what is the agenda?
3 hours from now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio to meet with the Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan to talk about a range of issues. Of course, a preview of President Trump's upcoming visit to the Middle East, which will include a stop in Riyadh, among other places. That trip will come sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Final details still being worked out, but a whole host of other issues to talk about. First, on the bilateral front, the U.S.-Saudi relationship. The State Department and Pentagon announcing just a few short weeks ago that there'd be a large weapons transfer to Saudi Arabia as part of a $100 million sale, including first of their kind laser defense weapons. Saudi Arabia will be the first country in the Middle East to acquire that particular weapons set. But the broader regional issues, of course, taking place right now, that the Saudis are hoping they can help shape, leading the negotiations on the U.S. talks with Ukraine and Russia on trying to get a deal reached there, and the issues right now in Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza, and helping the Saudis can play a positive role in those talks as well. The most dire talks right now on the Gaza front, the Saudis are becoming increasingly concerned about the lack of humanitarian aid going into Gaza. That will certainly be a topic of a preeminent concern today in those discussions between the top diplomats from Washington and Riyadh.
i24 News senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim, always a pleasure. Thank you very much, Mike, for this. All right, and joining us now here in studio, Dr. Gila Murciano, the CEO of Mitvim, the Israeli Institute for Regional Foreign Policy. Thank you very much, Dr. Murciano, for joining us. So let's talk about what is at stake from the Saudi standpoint. And later on, I assume sooner rather than later, we will get to the Israeli standpoint here. But from Riyadh's viewpoint, what is it that it wants to achieve?
Well, as Mike mentioned, this is a preparation for the big visit, the one that would come up probably in May or later this spring. And on the table, on the agenda, before every other topic, regional or global, is this investment plan, basically. This tour by Trump during the spring, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar maybe, $1 trillion of investment, basically, in US. Just like another day in the office, basically, in the GCC countries. But as mentioned here, there's a number of related topics. It's not just economy. It's about the Houthis, which the Saudis have a bitter experience with. It's about Gaza, where the Saudis hold a key role in the rebuilding of Gaza with or without normalization with Israel. But it's also about Iran. Because if we are discussing currently the negotiation path or the military path, the country that is bound to be affected most, if not damaged most, by a future airstrike is the Saudis, which we know are quite vulnerable, the trade routes, the Hormuz Straits, and so on. So there's a combination of economic, regional, and I will add another element, the global level. The Saudis are now not just a center, of course, but also the negotiation between the US and Russia on the Ukraine issue. So everything ends right now and starts and ends with the Saudis.
And all goes through the Gulf, if you will, those different hubs of mediation, if you will, from Oman through Doha to Riyadh itself. But you've mentioned the Iranian issue, and here we must admit that the Saudis been playing it both when it comes to the relationship, the rapprochement, the Chinese-mediated rapprochement vis-a-vis Iran, and also, of course, keeping all the options open when it comes to this perhaps more Western-led route, which also goes through Israel. At this point in time, playing, dancing on the two wedding floors here.
Indeed. I mean, what the Saudis are mostly doing is a hedging game. Sometimes we don't understand it in Israel if we bring in the Israeli perspective, which was always a binary perception of the region, pro-Iran and against Iran. And, you know, what we've seen in the last couple of years, and especially since the major event of the first Trump term, the attack over the Aramco production facilities in Saudi Arabia, is this understanding that they cannot really they cannot support or they cannot tolerate, basically, the zero-sum game. They cannot really live through this zero-sum game between Israel and Iran. They are much more vulnerable when we speak about the trade routes. And therefore, you see this hedging process. But you also see another thing. You see a growing Saudi demand, especially from the start of the war, for some kind of a security pact between the Saudis and the U.S. And this is also part of the discussion currently, continuing the hedging game, but also creating a new status vis-a-vis the U.S.
This Middle Eastern way, if you will, of eating the cake and having it too for the time being. We will be diving in further into the Iranian question in a second, but now we want to turn our focus to Lebanon as calls for Hezbollah to disarm gain momentum. A senior official telling Reuters the group is ready to hold talks with the Lebanese president about its weapons, but there's an if, and you've guessed it right. It has something to do with Israel. Let's take a closer look.
According to Lebanese political sources speaking to Reuters, U.S.-backed President Joseph Aoun, who when he took office in January vowed to establish a state monopoly on the control of arms, now intends to open talks with Hezbollah over its arsenal soon. Discussion of disarmament has intensified since the power balance was upended by last year's war with Israel and the ousting of Hezbollah's Syrian ally, ex-President Bashar al-Assad, weakening the group. Despite a November ceasefire, Israeli airstrikes have kept pressure on the terror group, while Washington has demanded Hezbollah disarm. U.S. envoy Morgan Ortagus, who visited Beirut over the weekend, repeated Washington's position that Hezbollah should be disarmed as soon as possible and that the Lebanese army was expected to do the job.
There are concerns that disarming Hezbollah quickly could lead to a civil war. What is the U.S. response to that fear?
We've been hearing that for 20 years. When you have cancer, you don't treat part of the cancer in your body and let the rest of it grow and fester. When you have cancer and you want to be a whole patient, you cut the cancer out.
A senior Hezbollah official speaking to Reuters said, quote,
Hezbollah is ready to discuss the matter of its arms if Israel withdraws from the 5 points and halts its aggression against Lebanese.
Israel has mostly withdrawn from South Lebanon, but has remained in 5 hilltop positions, with the intention to hand them over to Lebanese troops once the security situation was secure. In a televised speech in March, Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem said his group no longer had an armed presence settlements south of the Litani and put the onus on the Lebanese state to get Israel to withdraw, adding that there was still time for diplomatic solutions. Echoing this, Aoun agreed that Hezbollah's weaponry must be addressed through dialogue, because any attempts to disarm the group by force would prompt further conflict.
Dr. Murciano, it is truly fascinating to look at what is currently unfolding in Lebanon. Struggling country for a long while now, and at the moment it seems that Hezbollah is at a weaker point when it comes to its negotiations with the ruling regime there. How do you see things?
Well, first of all, as you mentioned, there's a direct link between Hezbollah's military integrity or capacity, which was obviously reduced. And more than that, I mean, the ability to rearm Hezbollah was curtailed by the fact that there's no more Assad regime. So we see attempt by Iran to try and smuggle both weapons and money, basically, through maritime, of course, or through all kinds of different... but it's not the same. There's no open channel of rearmament, and that affects directly the political future of Hezbollah.
The negotiating standpoint.
Exactly. For the first time, we see a government, we see Hezbollah, and I will be very cautious than, completely removing or cancelling Hezbollah's ongoing political influence on the reality in Lebanon.
Because they might be weaker militarily, but politically speaking, Hezbollah as an organization still has political clout.
And a lot of it is about the resolve of the other forces regarding Hezbollah's position in the system, both from the opposition, even from within the Shiite community. That's the major test for Hezbollah at the moment. But for the first time, Hezbollah is not a kingmaker in Lebanon. It still holds some power, and for the first time, because it's not a kingmaker, the topic of its basic subordination to the Lebanese government is being presented for the first time.
But on the flip side of it, Iran smuggling the weapons, again trying to find this new route, is also rearming its militias in Iraq. So if we're talking about this ring of fire, they definitely suffered a major blow in the aftermath of October 7. This ideology, this regional perception by the Iranians still exists very much so.
Of course, the unification of arenas still exists, and it becomes even more relevant now that we are discussing, again, this forward defense to deter an Israeli airstrike on Iran when the nuclear topic comes back into the discussion. However, I think that when it comes to rearming Hezbollah, the crown jewel, what used to be the crown jewel of the proxy network of Iran. So this is not just a topic about Hezbollah, it's also a test of resolve for Iran vis-a-vis the other proxies.
Right, it was a buffer, a main buffer for the Iranians. So we've mentioned Iran, and we said it yesterday, we will say it again today, directly, indirect, and vice versa. The United States and Iran are heading into unexpected high-level negotiations in Oman this coming Saturday, in a few days from now, marking the most significant diplomatic contact between the two countries since the collapse of the 2015 nuclear deal. So here's what to expect.
The United States and Iran are readying for surprising high-level talks in Oman on Saturday. The delegations will be led by U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. The goal, to negotiate a new nuclear deal that would halt Tehran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief.
We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen.
Despite U.S. President Donald Trump's claim that the contact will be direct, Iran insists the talks will be indirect. The White House spokesperson, however, doubled down.
They will be direct talks on Saturday, and I won't get ahead of the president on any further details.
But why does it matter whether the talks are direct or indirect? For both Washington and Tehran, the format is more than just diplomatic semantics. It's about a message to domestic and international audiences. For Iran, saying the talks are indirect helps them avoid the appearance of compromising with a country they officially label as hostile. It protects the regime's image at home, especially among hardliners who oppose direct engagement with the U.S. For the U.S., especially under Trump, claiming the talks are direct plays into a narrative of strength and control, presenting Trump as a deal-maker who can get enemies to the table face-to-face. Nonetheless, Trump's announcement of the big meeting came during a visit from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. But according to Israeli media, Netanyahu was notified of the talks just 2 hours before the public announcement and was reportedly given no guarantees that Israeli concerns would be addressed. Before departing Washington, Netanyahu made clear that Israel would only support a deal if all of Iran's nuclear infrastructure is physically destroyed.
We agree that Iran will not have nuclear weapons. This can be achieved through an agreement, but only if it's a Libya-style agreement. Entering, blowing up the facilities, dismantling all the equipment under American supervision and with American execution. That's good. The second possibility is that there won't be an agreement. In that case, the option is military.
However, I-24 News has learned the U.S. is prepared to allow Iran to maintain a civilian nuclear program for electricity production. While Iran insists its nuclear activities are peaceful, international watchdogs said Tuesday the country is on track to more than triple its uranium ore production this year, raising renewed fears it could soon cross the nuclear weapons threshold. As Washington and Tehran prepare to sit, directly or not, at the negotiating table, the stakes couldn't be higher, and the world will be watching Oman this weekend.
So to get a better understanding of what is happening, what is not happening, we want to welcome the magnificent Arash Azizi, contributing writer at The Atlantic, visiting fellow at the Boston University, co-author of The Shadow Commander. Hello, hello, Arash Azizi.
Hello, my dear friend. How are you? It's
so
great
we
to be
are
with you again.
Wonderful seeing you. We're old enough to remember the day we've met. It was late June 2015, the final push of the nuclear talks between Iran and the superpowers. But before we take a trip down memory lane, Arash, what are we hearing from Tehran officially, and what does it mean practically?
I'm glad you also remember our fun Vienna days, which we should reminisce about at some point. Look, Iran has made very clear that it wants to reach a deal with the United States. It has gone out of its way. President Pezeshkian, for example, said recently that Khamenei, the supreme leader, the big anti-American guy, has no problem with American investors in the Iranian economy. And hardliners in Iran are sort of being marginalized. So there's definitely a push. Iran knows. And look, the reason for that is quite clear, by the way. Iran knows that the alternative to these talks is a military attack by Israel. It knows that Trump is very serious when he says that, and it knows that it has no time to lose, and it knows that if it doesn't get a deal out of this, it might very well face military attacks. So all indications are that Iran will try to get a deal, but of course many hurdles remain. But I think that's what they're hoping to achieve.
But you know what, Arash Azizi, before we talk about the global ramifications, you've mentioned what is happening domestically. How is it all being perceived in Iran? How's the regime explaining or, quote unquote, selling those talks to the people, if at all?
I mean, they kind of don't require selling in a way. Iranians know that they're in a desperate economic situation. They need to talk to the United States, that the Iranian economy needs lifting. Just announcing that the talks are happening already rallied the Iranian rial by 5%. It went up by 5% just when they said just when President Trump said they were going to be talks. So if anything, of course, it's kind of humiliating for them because Khamenei, just until a couple of months ago, was saying we're never going to talk to the U.S. He actually said talking to the U.S. is, and I quote, dishonorable, irrational, and he uses that. And this is just in February. But they're used to him doing these kind of moves, and they're kind of enjoying, I guess, his humiliation. But
dishonorable, irrational, and I'm going to do all of that and more. So how will sanctions play into the upcoming talks? Because one hand is extending the carrot with the Oman talks. The other one is whipping the stick of with the sanctions.
Yeah, so I mean, Iran is hoping to get some sanctions relief, to even get some investment. Araghchi, Iranian foreign minister, in his op-ed in Washington Post, spoke about 2015. He said, last time there was a deal. Iran ordered 80 planes from Boeing. This is the sort of thing that President Trump appreciates. So sanctions relief is important, but sanctions relief has been the reason why Iran engaged in the talks. This is the talks that you and I were reporting on in 2015. That's the reason they went in there. But now they have a more immediate reason, frankly, because it's not just about sanctions relief; it's about avoiding military attacks. It's quite clear to me that if these talks fail, we're thinking about possible military attacks this year, by Israel and the United States. And, you don't want to cross Trump. I think they understand it. I think there's a fear of Trump in Iran. We've seen it since last year. Already, Iranian political sphere has changed because of the fear they had of Trump's return. So they're going to be very careful not to mess with him because they know it can prove costly. And, of course, they're seeing it in Yemen as well.
So it's not so much about the opportunity, but more so about the risk. And let's do now, let's engage in some guided imagination, if you will. Fast forwarding to Saturday night, what's the starting point of the discussions? The 2015 deal is a reference point or a first start? Sitting down around the table in Oman, what's the first sentence?
So I think one of the main difficulties there is that, Witkoff doesn't have sort of a technical team with him, and other people are saying it. These are very sort of detailed technical matters. It took 2 years last time, and Arakchi is a veteran of those talks, right? Those talks, Arakchi was the deputy lead negotiator in those talks, and then he was actually the lead negotiator later on in at some part of those talks, right, up to 2019, 2020, those kind of years. And Witkoff, is very new to this, obviously. He doesn't have a diplomatic background, so there will be some difficulties there. But look, I think the outlook are very clear. I think what Arakchi is going to say as soon as he sits down there, I think he's going to say, look, we don't want nuclear weapons. We want to reassure you of this. So let's agree on this goal. We don't want nuclear weapons. We will assure you of this. And we're also prepared to talk about other things. One thing Iran won't talk about is its missile program.
Right.
So one thing that could lead the talks to collapse is the missile program, which Iran has painstakingly built over the years. It might be happy to give guarantees of how, about its regional posture in general, to promise sort of non-aggression against other countries and things like that.
No one is developing ballistic missiles to, get ahead of their poetry, right? But this is how it is, I guess. Mr. Arash Azizi, I'm not sure what is going to come out of these talks, but one thing is for certain, we will be talking much more often in the coming days, and this is already a good thing. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you very much. I hope maybe we should go to Oman or somewhere else for the next round of talks.
Well, I'm not sure I'm very welcome there, but we will try to get ahead of it. Thank you very much, Arash Azizi. Always a pleasure. Thank you. Back here in studio with Dr. Ghila Murciano. Well, I do want us to begin with the end, or rather at the end. Witkoff. He was assigned the hostage case. Now he's being reassigned or getting the Iran case as well. It's a very, very, very packed table.
Right. But I mean, Witkoff is somewhat becoming the dove, or at least the diplomacy guy.
A man of all seasons,
especially,
right?
A trump card, no pun intended.
Yeah.
But especially for special missions. And by the way, one of the interesting things about the Iran issue, when you look at the Trump cluster, is that unlike in any other topic, from Canada to Greenland to the Gaza Riviera, this is a topic where Trump is much more cautious. It's less the shock and awe and rocking the boat. But from even the early phases of his campaign, you've seen him taking a very different route than the one he took in the first term, from maximum pressure into a more diplomatic or diplomacy-first approach. Now, some would say that you see Trump reinstating the maximum pressure. But if you zoom in, you see the difference from back then, 2018 and now. Exactly. Back then it was about a dozen different conditions. A lot of them is about a regime change in Iran. Now there's only one condition for lifting the sanctions. And that condition is stop with your nuclear project altogether.
Interesting.
But one of the things, if you look at the good old days that you mentioned, the good old days that never were, or 2015, one of the major differences.
Young, naive, and reckless, eh?
Of course, in Oman or other places, in the end, the biggest difference. The failure of the maximum pressure is the fact that now we are talking about a different Iran, a different status of its nuclear project. We are talking about Iran as a nuclear threshold state, which means it's not a question of capabilities anymore, or preventing capabilities, of will, of motivations. Weeks from developing or reaching the right amount, we are talking about 10 different devices according to the last IAEA report. And more than just the capability.
The issue of access till this day was not being regulated properly.
Of course, and then when you speak about the knowledge and the experience, this is something that many would claim is irreversible.
Right.
So what will be the items of the new deal? Right now, Israel, currently, the official position of the Israeli government does not really deal with it. When Netanyahu presented the Libyan option, it almost as a dead end to begin with, because the lesson from Libya is to develop,
not do the Libyan framework.
So there's not, it's a very clear hint about the approach of really if Israel takes negotiations seriously or not, instead of trying to focus on the bottlenecks, what can still be saved, basically, or should be focused on in a future deal. issues of the nuclear trigger that we mentioned before, the last maybe frontier or the last obstacle between Iran and a nuclear device, issues of what would happen with this 60% enriched uranium, issues about the advanced centrifuges, even issues relating to the missile, the topic that also appeared in 2015. But right now, you don't see a clear position on that level from the Israeli side.
So if I understand correctly, Israel should focus now, according to you, Dr. Murciano, on specific clauses, specific terms of the agreement, and not on the mere idea of an agreement.
Of course. And one of the major caveats, the major vices of the previous agreement was not so much about what was inside the agreement, the JCPOA, but what was not included in it, which was Iran's regional activity. And this is a place where we are in a different place at the moment, because what happened since the last agreement is the Abraham Accords, is the ability to create a joint regional frontier, and to cooperate on that level and to connect between those 2 points. In the situation of a strategic inferiority of Iran, which I spoke about regarding its proxies, to try and combine both. It's not a discussion that is held in Israel at the moment. The only side that is all about military activity first, maybe regime change first, is the Israeli government at the moment.
All right, and on that point, you're staying with us, Dr. Murciano, but you mentioned the UN watchdog. We want to turn our focus now to the UN's chemical weapons watchdog, saying that there remain over 100 chemical weapon sites in Syria. Yes, and there are concerns that they could all fall, according to a report, into the hands of either extremist or terror groups. So for more, let's take a look at this next report.
Over 100 chemical weapon sites still remain in Syria, according to recent figures presented by the Watchdog Group, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. The number of sites and whether they are secured has remained a mystery since the toppling of the Assad government last December. Experts have expressed concerns about the possibility that militant groups, exploiting the instability caused by the regime change, could gain access to poorly secured chemical weapons storage facilities.
The secret nature of the program, the collapse of the Assad regime, and the subsequent aerial strikes conducted by Israel on December 9th, a day after the regime fell, all create additional challenges to the logistical.
In a March visit to the Global Chemical Weapons Watchdog headquarters in The Hague, Syria's foreign minister said that the government would dismantle remaining chemical weapons stores and comply with international law.
The new Syrian government that I represent here today is determined to rebuild Syria's future for a foundation of transparency, justice, cooperation with the international community. This chemical weapons program, created under the Assad era, is not our program.
Syria's interim authorities should fully renounce and suppress terrorism, exclude foreign terrorist fighters from any official roles, prevent Iran and its proxies from exploiting Syrian territory, take meaningful steps to verifiably destroy Assad's chemical weapons, assist in the recovery of U.S. and other citizens who have been disappeared in Syria, and ensure the security and freedoms of Syria's religious and ethnic minorities.
We're taking now a very short break, but when we get back from Gaza to Jakarta, the surprising announcement of the Indonesian leader, and is the Taliban asking the Americans to come back to Afghanistan? A mysterious flight sparks much speculation there, and bracing for the Hajj, who will not be allowed to join the pilgrimage, and why Saudi Arabia getting ready.
Dance, music, and magic immerse you in the story of Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem, an unforgettable musical where the past and present meet. Welcome to the heart of the most sought-after city in the world. A unique experience only at Kikar HaMusika. Reserve now at thisisjerusalem.co.il.
bad posture. The ever-increasing hours we spend sitting, working, and even while trying to relax at home is twisting our vertebrae out of alignment and creating strain and pain on muscles, ligaments, and joints. A scientifically designed spine and back support device that uses precision biometric technology to perfectly align the back and spine for all-day comfort and support, creating perfect posture for your back every time you sit down. Now features extra-wide acupressure comfort pads as well as an extended height back panel for even more support, making it perfect for all body types. Also features a precision wing design that perfectly cradles your back and spine with amazing ergonomic support that leaves you feeling refreshed and energized even after sitting all day.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. We want to head now to Israel's southern border with the Gaza Strip. I-24 News correspondent Robert Swift, you're in the southern city of Sderot. Robert, before we discuss what is happening now on the ground from the other side of the border in the Gaza Strip, let's begin with what was the IDF investigation into what occurred in Sderot on October 7th was released today. So what can we say? Did we get any answers?
That's right. I'm standing in the memorial that once was the police station, demolished following the attack that took place that day. The IDF's operational report into events that took place here, it found a series of failings. The bottom line is that the IDF said it failed in its mission to defend Sderot. Part of the reason it said that this happened is because they simply didn't envisage a scenario where Hamas would conduct an all-out assault against an Israeli city. Now, some of the key findings that were in that report, one was that there was no security barrier around the city itself, which enabled Hamas to simply drive in through one of the major highways adjacent to the city. The collapse of command and control inside the IDF's Gaza division added to the fog of war. It meant that many of the troops that were rushing down to take part in the battle that day, they came here to Sderot, which ended up in a situation where there was an overabundance of troops here in the city, whilst many of the communities further south were desperately needing reinforcements and didn't receive them. Additionally to that, it noted that the first wave of Hamas attackers, they were able to bypass defences, get into the city. But fortunately for the city's residents, the second and third waves of Hamas attackers were blocked by the IDF troops that had positioned themselves along the border. On top of this, there was some smaller scale findings, such as the fact that the local defence team that were based here, they were under-equipped and under-trained. And many of the local residents, while they were aware that a security incident was taking place, they could hear the sirens in the streets. Many of them, being observant Jews, were not looking at their phones, and so were not aware that on top of the rocket attacks, there was Hamas attackers inside the city itself. The attack that took place in the police station behind me, that was the focal point of the fighting inside Sderot. Nearly 30 of the Hamas attackers that infiltrated the city came directly to this location. and it was their primary target. One of the biggest battles that took place here in the city happened right here. In the end, the IDF decided to demolish the police station, to hit it with attacks from the air, tank fire, and even bulldozers as a result of the massive firefight that took place in this area.
Robert, fast forwarding to now, as we speak, the IDF is essentially carving out the strip into different sweats of land, if you will. What can you tell us essentially on what is next?
Right, so in the last week, we've seen that the IDF is establishing the Morag corridor. This is in the south of Gaza, between Khan Yunis and Rafah. And previously, the IDF has sent out evacuation orders for the entirety of Rafah. Now, there's been reports in the Israeli media today that the IDF intends and has been acting in the last week or so to incorporate the entirety of the city of Rafah into the buffer zone. The buffer zone being the areas of Gaza that the IDF has demolished to create a gap between Gaza and Israel. Now, we spoke to the IDF today, asking them whether these reports were accurate or not. The IDF did not directly address that and didn't mention Rafah by name, but what they did say is the IDF is destroying terrorist infrastructure, maintaining a broad military presence in the security zone adjacent to Israel, and working to remove threats in the area. They went on to say that this operation is essential to prevent Hamas operating in the area and in order to protect both the IDF troops inside Gaza and the residents in Israel itself. Now, it does appear that this may be part of the IDF's operations, essentially aiming to place pressure on Hamas in order to get it to come back to the negotiating table. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said in last week and in recent days that land will be seized from Gaza in order to place Hamas in a position that it has to negotiate.
Yeah.
This may be what we're seeing in this instance.
I-24 News correspondent Robert Swift, thank you so very much for this update from the southern city of Sderot. Thank you, Robert. Back here in studio with the CEO of Mitvim, the Israeli Institute for Regional Foreign Policies, Dr. Gil Mosiano. Thank you very much, Dr. Mosiano, for staying with us. So when we're looking at what is currently happening and or not happening in the Gaza Strip, where are we heading?
Well, I mean, what we currently have is an ongoing attempt to pressure Hamas, and your colleague mentioned the attempt to take out the commander of the Sajaiya Brigade, or Sajaiya Battalion. But we also have to take into account the fact that this is the third time that the head or the commander of the Sajaiya Battalion is, being eliminated. I hope that they succeeded, but being eliminated. And it kind of gives you maybe a metaphor about the fact that, the IDF is doing its job, but there's a basic question about the strategic goal of this operation. And if we are talking about the core issue of what to do with Hamas in the next phase, how do you create a strategic game changers, not just regarding the hostages, which should be the first priority, but about the entire situation, the day after, basically, creating a new political order? Again, this is a topic where there's no even an attempt to discuss the political alternative to Hamas, or any kind of anything beyond the tactical or operational element.
So speaking of the day after, surprising statement, we must say, the president of Indonesia saying his country is ready to temporarily take in Gazans impacted by the war, as Indonesia aims to have a hand essentially in seeking an end to the conflict. Our correspondent Nicole Tzedek with the details.
Before jetting off to the Middle East, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto made a major announcement about the war in Gaza, and a surprising one.
Kami siap mengevakuasi.
We are ready to evacuate those who are injured, traumatized, and orphaned. Whoever is recommended by the Palestinian Authority who wants to be evacuated to Indonesia, we are ready to send planes to transport them.
Yang terkait di situ.
Temporarily taking in displaced Gazans. A statement from the president that comes only 2 months after Indonesia's foreign ministry said Indonesia strongly rejects any attempt to forcibly displace Palestinians or alter the demographic composition of the occupied Palestinian territory, a response to U.S. President Donald Trump's idea of moving Palestinians out of Gaza and creating the Riviera of the Middle East. It's a plan Trump once again discussed with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during his impromptu trip to Washington.
And the president put forward a vision, a bold vision, which we discussed as well, including the countries that might be amenable and are amenable to accepting Palestinians of their free choice if they choose to go there.
It's recently been reported that Jerusalem is negotiating with several countries on the plan to relocate Gazans. But Indonesia is likely not one of those, as the two countries lack diplomatic ties. But something both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Subianto are outwardly agreeing on is that this move won't be forced on anyone.
We're expecting to evacuate about 1,000 victims in the first batch under one condition, that everybody should agree on it and that they would be in Indonesia temporarily until they have fully recovered from their injuries and the situation in Gaza is safe for their return.
The president embarked on a week-long visit to the Middle East to try and gain support for this plan from the UAE, Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, and Jordan, as the country with the world's largest Muslim population seeks to have a stronger say in the ongoing conflict.
Dr. Murciano, not focusing solely on the Indonesian offer, feasible, yes or no, but generally speaking on the Trump relocation proposal, how feasible is that?
Well, I think that when we speak about the Indonesian move, a low-cost gesture to earn points with Trump, but maybe it is the exception that kind of indicates the general trend. The total failure of this specific plan from showing any feasible progress, especially when you speak about the two major clients, Egypt and Jordan. Right. Full refusal in the Arab world to even entertain the thought about any kind of displacement of Gazans. And by the way, some would say that that was the initial goal of Trump when he presented the idea. They created an alternative plan, the Cairo Declaration, basically.
Right,
that offered
to shake things up.
Exactly. But again, a total rejection of that plan. There were all kinds of talks about Libya and all kinds of talks about other locations until now without any kind of real traction. So basically the only side today actually working or entertaining the thought is the Israeli government, and I would say some of the advisors of Trump. Some of them are already in many ways withdrew from that specific plan.
In Yiddish, some would say, "Gar nicht mit gar nicht." Yeah. Dr. Gile Murciano, thank you very much for joining us throughout this broadcast. We appreciate your time, your insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to this now. What is really happening at the Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan? A mysterious U.S. military flight sparks much speculation. Local media reports suggest the C-17 aircraft took off from Doha, arrived in Afghanistan via Pakistan. If that wasn't peculiar enough, the report suggested the aircraft was said to be carrying senior U.S. intelligence officials, including CIA Deputy Chief Michael Ellis, and military equipment. Yes, so to get a better understanding of what exactly is happening, we're saying hello now to Javid Faisal, former spokesperson to the Afghanistan Security Council. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, too, for having me.
So is there any credibility to this report? Would the Taliban essentially invite the U.S. back into Afghanistan?
Well, we keep hearing reports in rumors, but due to a suppression on the media in free speech in Afghanistan, it's not possible to have a confirmation from those in power in Kabul. But we have heard reports, and the people who share these reports are credible.
Any, when we're talking about President Trump repeatedly talking about taking back control of the Bagram base, it's not the first time we're hearing about it, both symbolic and practical meaning here.
Yes, I think the U.S. does need Bagram. It's a very strategic location, a location of strategic importance, not only for the U.S., but other regional and global powers in that part of the world, I believe, are important. And in the same time, I think the Taliban are also willing to have this partnership with the U.S. They want to come to an accord, to an agreement. They're facing U.S. So I think they will do whatever they can to please the U.S.
So we have seen high-level talks to release American prisoners, for example, bounties lifted from Taliban officials. But according to the UN, the U.S. is restoring emergency food aid to many, many countries, not Yemen, not Afghanistan. So there's still a gap between this and that level of cooperation.
Yes, that's true. But I think at this stage, they will be trying to negotiate a partnership. Like how they could move forward from what is existing today. So I think there will be some level of speaking to one another, having negotiations and dialogue, and reaching a point where both sides could be happy.
So the mere communication line is what counts at this point in time. Mr. Javeed Faisal, former spokesperson for the Afghanistan Security Council, thank you very much for your time, for your insight. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are nearing the Hajj. Saudi Arabia is getting ready, issuing visa suspension for 14 countries ahead of the annual pilgrimage. Apparently, many pilgrims perform the Hajj without proper permits. Or Alex Schloss explains why it's a problem.
As the annual Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca nears, Saudi Arabia has decided to suspend the issuing of visas for citizens from 14 countries. Saudi Arabia said that only those going through official channels to obtain a Hajj visa will be allowed into the kingdom come the Hajj season. The suspended countries include Egypt, Jordan, and Yemen. In recent years, many pilgrims have entered the country on tourist visas to join Hajj without official permits, causing overcrowding and raising safety concerns. In 2024, at least 1,300 pilgrims died, most from heat-related complications, with the majority of the deceased not possessing official Hajj permits. Saudi officials reported that around 400,000 unregistered pilgrims participated in the pilgrimage last year, with a significant number coming from Egypt, one of the countries on the list of visa suspensions.
It was a very hard day because of the extreme heat. A lot of people died. The ambulances were overwhelmed. You would talk to someone and suddenly they would die. It was a very hard day, but thank God it eventually came to an end.
Each country receives a limited number of Hajj permits under a quota system and distributes them through a lottery. However, due to the high cost of official packages, many people, especially from poorer nations, attempt the pilgrimage without the required documents. Unregistered pilgrims are often denied access to critical amenities in the Saudi heat, such as air-conditioned tents, hospitals, and ambulance services, making the already physically straining pilgrimage even more dangerous.
In Hajj, we have to walk a lot. So for helping her, I have brought her on her wheelchair to perform all the Hajj, all the activities of the Hajj. Hajj is a difficult task to do for the old people, and it's so heat over here, so hot over here.
Those from the list of nations hit with visa suspensions can still register for an official Hajj visa through the Saudi government.
And putting the spotlight now on the Sahara. Yes, the U.S. reaffirms its recognition of the Moroccan sovereignty over the long-frozen disputed territory. So why now? Saying hello, good evening to Dr. Mohammed Shtatu, political analyst, senior professor at the University of Rabat. Dr. Shtatu, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So sometimes making a statement means someone is disputing the statement. So give us the bigger picture here. Why are we hearing this reaffirmation, American reaffirmation, at this point in time?
Well, because in the late the department, in the later government of Biden, there were doubts about the recognition of the Moroccan Sahara by the United States. And we know Trump was the one who initiated this recognition in the tripartite agreement between Morocco, the United States and Israel. And this launched a very long process of, exchange and development between Morocco and Israel. So the recognition again today seems to show to everyone that the Morocco and Israel and the United States are back on business, and that the Abraham Accords are again back on business, and that Morocco has supported Israel throughout the war and still does, and has a very good relationship with the United States when it comes to this. And Morocco also is a very important ally for the United States in the region, fighting violence in the Sahel and helping in the Sahel and fighting Islamism in North Africa,
of stability
over the Muslim world.
Yeah, a source of stability, definitely the Moroccan standpoint here. So you're essentially saying, Dr. Sderot, that reaffirming the Moroccan sovereignty, Sahara means reaffirming the strength of the Abraham Accords, even amid those turbulent times. Sure.
I mean, the Abraham Accords are very important. And we are all hoping that these accords will lead to peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And also the important thing is that the development that this will incur in the long run in the Middle East and the peace that will come as a result of this development. We're seeing already that the Abraham Accords have scored a lot of points in terms of economic exchanges between different countries of the Middle East and Israel, and we are hoping that this will continue and that this will also bring a lasting peace in the Middle East.
What else stood out for you during this meeting between Secretary of State Rubio and the Moroccan Foreign Minister Bourita when it comes to the, what are the Moroccan objectives? Let's put it that way, Dr. Sderot.
Well, the Moroccan objectives is to secure that the Sahara is Moroccan 100% and that it becomes an area of development and also an area to help other African countries, because Morocco is the gate to the African countries in the Sahel. Morocco is already helping the Sahel countries with initiatives, economic initiatives, and also security. And Morocco also helps through the Sahara to help other African countries and to fight, terrorism in the area.
Yeah, so to solidify its position as a beacon of stability in this turbulent area, this turbulent neighborhood. Dr. Mohammed Sderot, political analyst, senior professor at the University of Rabat. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Sderot.
Pleasure.
All right, and now back here to Israel. 5 months have passed since the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire went into force, but many of the villages along the border with Lebanon are yet to see evacuated residents fully return. The IDF is beefing up the border defenses, maintaining 5 outposts inside Lebanon. Our correspondent Robert Swift toured the area around the village of Shtula with the IDF to see whether such measures are really, truly reassuring local residents there. Here's a report.
The Israeli village of Shtula is a victim of geography. It sits upon a hill, meters from the Lebanese border.
Here you can understand the challenge. You can see Zarit or Shtula, a community that we want to prosper, that sits on the border. And on the other side, you can see Lebanon.
During the fighting between the IDF and Hezbollah, Shtula was one of the communities most targeted by anti-tank missiles.
We have to set a defensive plan that will enable us to bring civilians back and be ready for a Hezbollah attack.
Most of the village's residents are yet to return, despite the relative quiet that holds over Israel's northern frontier. Next door, in another house damaged by a missile fire, one resident had returned temporarily to the home where he was married and raised 2 children.
For now, we're renting an apartment that is 2.5 kilometers further from the border. We're there for now, until life returns to normal and peace is restored, which is the most important thing. Then we will bring the children back here with pleasure. Definitely.
נחזיר את הילדים הנה בכיף, כן, כן. חד משמעי.
Yakov was home just long enough to conduct repairs and collect a few items, but he said he had a message for his Lebanese neighbors in their own language.
اوعك ما انتوا حضرتوا الاكل اللي اكلته عشان تفهموا بدكم خلاص اقعدوا على السكت.
Across from Shtula, one of the IDF's remaining positions inside Lebanon is visible.
5 posts in Lebanon.
And each of them are about the same size?
About the same size. Our posts in Lebanon are tactical posts. Their main mission is to better or fortify the defenses of the communities on the border.
Built on high ground, they act as watchtowers along the length of the border. Last month, Defense Minister Israel Katz said the army will remain in these locations indefinitely, though Colonel Razili said that the IDF hopes the Lebanese army deploying to the area will remove the need for the outposts. We depart Shtula, travelling to a nearby IDF base where in the early months of the war, I-24 News witnessed fierce clashes between the army and Hezbollah.
On the hill behind me where you can see the smoke, that appears to be a vehicle or something else that's been struck by a Hezbollah anti-tank weapon.
Tanks and infantry maintain their guard on the border, a manpower requirement impacting conscripts and reservists alike.
There's something about this war that wears you down. We joined the army very young and entered something difficult, unexpected. In the process, we discover new challenges. But as Ace said, we overcome everything out of a sense of commitment that a few years ago others stood here in our place. Today it's our turn, and we're here to ensure peace and protection for the residents of the North.
We understand there's a different mindset that we need to change in our heads. We're used to quick wars or quick maneuvers, a month or two or whatever. All the wars Israel has had since '48 were pretty quick. We understand that we're here for a marathon run for a long time. It's very tough for the military, for the reserves specifically.
Nearby, the Lebanese village of Aita Shab stands, half its buildings in ruins. The IDF didn't permit us to film the village, but we were able to observe it, just long enough to spot the Hezbollah flag flying there.
There's a difference in southern Lebanon between villages that are Christian, Shiite, and Sunni. The Shiite villages, you call them villages, we call them terror bases. Every house that we went in, every school, every mosque, there was a school or infirmary and a weapons cache.
But the Shiite villages, the IDF has demolished them?
Not completely. We didn't demolish a village. We went and targeted locations that we found weapons, ammunition, military infrastructure.
Shtula is just one of the many Israeli villages along the border disrupted by the war with Hezbollah. Some have bounced back faster, with businesses opening and children returning to school. Others, like Shtula, remain semi-populated, their residents waiting to see if the calm really has returned.
Yeah, the remaining gap between security and the sense of security still exists. All right, this is it from us for tonight. We will be here tomorrow right after the quick break. David Matlin will be here with the rundown, hopefully with much good news. Thank you very much for joining us. May we all have a peaceful rest of the night.
Dance, music, and magic immerse you in the story of Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem, an unforgettable musical where the past and present meet. Welcome to the heart of the most sought-after city in the world. A unique experience only at Kikar HaMusika. Reserve now at thisisjerusalem.co.il.
do you get your news? How do you know what sources to trust? And to paint a clear picture of the entire story, you need a breakdown of the constant stream of events, top stories, expert analysts, and the best journalists bringing you real voices on the ground. We're breaking it all down on The Rundown. Get the facts, stay informed, and be a voice of reason for the Middle East.
The United States pushes the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah in accordance with the ceasefire with Israel, as new reports emerge about Hezbollah's potential willingness to negotiate. The Israel Defense Force publishes their October 7th report on the city of Sderot, located less than a mile from the border with Gaza, amid the Hamas-led onslaught of that day that murdered dozens of civilians and police officers. And the effects of global tariffs are being felt in Israel as the shekel loses value to the dollar and concerns only grow alongside the rising trade war between the U.S. and China. Hello, welcome to Night 24 News. I'm David Matlin, coming to you live from Tel Aviv. You're watching The Rundown. Now, the U.S. brokered ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah demands that the Lebanese terror group disarm. And pressure to begin that process is gaining momentum. Now, a senior Hezbollah official was quoted by Reuters claiming the group is ready to negotiate with the Lebanese president about its sophisticated arsenal. That's if Israel withdraws from South Lebanon and stops taking action against them. Now, at 24 News, Jody Notelovitz has the report.
According to Lebanese political sources speaking to Reuters, U.S.-backed President Joseph Aoun, who when he took office in January vowed to establish a state monopoly on the control of arms, now intends to open talks with Hezbollah over its arsenal soon. Discussion of disarmament has intensified since the power balance was upended by last year's war with Israel and the ousting of Hezbollah's Syrian ally, ex-President Bashar al-Assad, weakening the group. Despite a November ceasefire, Israeli airstrikes have kept pressure on the terror group, while Washington has demanded Hezbollah disarm. U.S. envoy Morgan Ortagus, who visited Beirut over the weekend, repeated Washington's position that Hezbollah should be disarmed as soon as possible and that the Lebanese army was expected to do the job.
There are concerns that disarming Hezbollah quickly could lead to a civil war. What is the U.S. response to that fear?
We've been hearing that for 20 years.
When you have cancer, you don't treat part of the cancer in your body and let the rest of it grow and fester. When you have cancer and you want to be a whole patient, you cut the cancer out.
A senior Hezbollah official speaking to Reuters said, quote,
Hezbollah is ready to discuss the matter of its arms if Israel withdraws from the 5 points and halts its aggression against Lebanese.
Israel has mostly withdrawn from South Lebanon, but has remained in 5 hilltop positions, with the intention to hand them over to Lebanese troops once the security situation was secure. In a televised speech in March, Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem said his group no longer had an armed presence south of the Litani and put the onus on the Lebanese state to get Israel to withdraw, adding that there was still time for diplomatic solutions. Echoing this, Aoun agreed that Hezbollah's weaponry must be addressed through dialogue, because any attempts to disarm the group by force would prompt further conflict.
Now we're joined in the studio by Lieutenant Colonel of the IDF Reserve, Sderot Avital, former commander of the Special Forces of the IDF, and our correspondent, Balir Sladin, in the studio. Balir, I'll come to you first on this. What appears to have motivated Hezbollah to come to the table right now, if that in fact is what's happening? I have to admit, there's obviously a lot of doubt within Israel on the veracity of these claims, on whether or not Hezbollah might come to the table. After all, this is an organization whose flag bears an assault rifle. So how does disarming come into the picture?
Well, David, let me be pessimistic here, because yes, it's the first time that we get some incredible source to some, of course, very respected agency, Reuters, that's right. And there is a lot of pressure from inside Lebanon to Hezbollah, to disarm, including from politicians, but also from the public in Lebanon, especially after the war with Israel. Now, what we have here also in this report that Hezbollah, an unnamed Hezbollah official is asking for the Israeli withdrawal and the stop of the attacks against their operatives, and then they will start talking about disarmament. It means that they are trying to achieve some sort of an achievement without committing to actually disarm. We will actually discuss that only after the complete Israeli withdrawal. And we just mentioned yesterday, actually, the fact that they are using a new smuggling route through the sea, through the Beirut port. And then also the IDF is today talking about some underground bunker that they're using in order to manufacture more arms. That means that they did not actually give up on their objective, which is, of course, a war with Israel and completely destroying Israel after all. That is added also to the fact that there are Israeli concerns over the fact that almost 60% of the Lebanese army in the south that are in charge of dismantling Hezbollah are Shiites, actually. And there were also reports about some sort of a collaboration between officials in the Lebanese army commanders and Hezbollah as a group. So it means that I don't think that for now, at least, they will actually ditch this idea of a war with Israel, continue with the armed resistance, quote unquote, against Israel. Maybe they are thinking that for now we cannot actually declare that we will continue with this war because of the current situation in Lebanon, but they're leaving their options for the future.
Look, and just to add on to this, yes, the IDF just coming out in the last hour, I think, saying that they identified and looking at in Beirut, a weapons manufacturing site put together again by Hezbollah. So, on the ground, facts reveal that, in fact, disarmament isn't part of the Hezbollah plan right now. But a key part of the talking points right now have to do with this IDF presence on these 5 hilltop positions in southern Lebanon. You know Lebanon well. I know you know southern Lebanon, very well from your time in the military. Talk about the importance of these 5 positions the IDF's holding, and how critical this is as a talking point or as a point of leverage here.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, that for sure we have to be very cautious about this declaration and whether there's a prospect really of having Lebanon, according to the one law, one weapon concept of a reasonable state. Nonetheless, I would say the campaign that we conducted and the way we mixed military moves with policy-making moves together with the Americans and a little bit of the French, it was a very good campaign. And we really pushed Lebanon into a position or a crossroad or a junction in which Lebanon should decide about its future. And I want to remind the audience that we insisted all through the campaign not to hit Lebanese infrastructure. We were attacked from Lebanon, but we made the distinction, though technically we could have just skipped the distinction and attacked Lebanon. We didn't, because we really were eyeing or targeting this long-term goal. So the long-term of having Lebanon, which is a state, a one weapon, one law kind of a state is still something that we have to try to shape Lebanon or help Lebanon.
The U.S. clearly doing that.
Exactly.
Special envoy.
So, but then we have to be cautious, and the cautious really brings us to those posts that we have to take, and the fact that we still use firepower when it's needed, and I think we do it in a measured way when the targets are clear and clean. I think there's no comparison with the way we conduct the campaign in the north to the problematic campaign we have in the south. More problematic, of course, given the hostages issue, but a good campaign, and let's hope Lebanon would have to make a decision going forward. There were other countries in the history that had different weaponry, militia, even Israel in the 40s, and then in 48 we united to one army. Let's hope, but we have to be very cautious about the plans.
Just to add here also, one thing that is concerning for the Americans as well is the fact that there is no timeline. I mean, they are talking about disarmament. They are talking about disarmament also of the Palestinian factions in southern Lebanon, but there is no timeline. They're, of course, talking about some, concerns over civil war in Lebanon, all of that. Credible excuses, I would say, but of course, that can't continue forever. There needs to be some solution to this.
Yeah, left wondering if comments like this leaked, to the press, maybe, to buy time or what. Thanks, gentlemen. Stay with us. More topics to bring the way of our viewers here. The United States and Iran, they're heading into high-level negotiations hosted in Oman this Saturday, marking perhaps the most significant diplomatic contact between the two countries that's since President Trump withdrew from the nuclear deal back in 2018. Here's what to expect.
The United States and Iran are readying for surprising high-level talks in Oman on Saturday. The delegations will be led by U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. The goal, to negotiate a new nuclear deal that would halt Tehran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief.
We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen.
Despite U.S. President Donald Trump's claim that the contact will be direct, Iran insists the talks will be indirect. The White House spokesperson, however, doubled down.
They will be direct talks on Saturday, and I won't get ahead of the president on any further details.
But why does it matter whether the talks are direct or indirect? For both Washington and Tehran, the format is more than just diplomatic semantics. It's about a message to domestic and international audiences. For Iran, saying the talks are indirect helps them avoid the appearance of compromising with a country they officially label as hostile. It protects the regime's image at home, especially among hardliners who oppose direct engagement with the U.S. For the U.S., especially under Trump, claiming the talks are direct plays into a narrative of strength and control, presenting Trump as a deal-maker who can get enemies to the table face-to-face. Nonetheless, Trump's announcement of the big meeting came during a visit from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. But according to Israeli media, Netanyahu was notified of the talks just 2 hours before the public announcement and was reportedly given no guarantees that Israeli concerns would be addressed. Before departing Washington, Netanyahu made clear that Israel would only support a deal if all of Iran's nuclear infrastructure is physically destroyed.
We agree that Iran will not have nuclear weapons. This can be achieved through an agreement, but only if it's a Libya-style agreement. Entering, blowing up the facilities, dismantling all the equipment under American supervision and with American execution. That's good. The second possibility is that there won't be an agreement. In that case, the option is military.
However, I-24 News has learned the U.S. is prepared to allow Iran to maintain a civilian nuclear program for electricity production. While Iran insists its nuclear activities are peaceful, international watchdogs said Tuesday the country is on track to more than triple its uranium ore production this year, raising renewed fears it could soon cross the nuclear weapons threshold. As Washington and Tehran prepare to sit, directly or not, at the negotiating table, the stakes couldn't be higher, and the world will be watching Oman this weekend.
Obviously, much more to discuss around that. We're joined in the studio now by Iran researcher and analyst and the founder of the IDF Persian platforms, Ben Sabti. Thanks for being with us. I know you're busy in the Israeli airwaves these days. I want to start to say, look, key differences in the 2015 situation to 2025, where instead of a sort of arms control, now the U.S. is talking about disarmament, verifiable demolition even of nuclear enrichment facilities. Prime Minister Netanyahu adding on to that, referring to the Libyan model, so quote unquote. Look, how does that fit with Iran's still hard stance, saying even this week they will never give up their nuclear programs? Where do these sides meet?
Yes. First of all, it's better not to remind them the Libyan case because it insults them, and we know the end of the Gaddafi life. So it's better not to bring them into their face. You know, sometimes if you say the same thing in another words to your enemy, maybe it gets softer. But in the main issue, the problem is that Iran, in that technology, in that progress, is not in the same place. Like it was in 2014, 2015, they have a lot of enrichment material, much more than they had. They have about 270 or 280 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. It's very high, and it's very close to making almost the bomb. They call it accidentally, but they also enriched uranium, a few grams, to 90%, to 85%.
Accidentally, is their claim?
Everything happens in Iran accidentally, even the revolution. So it's a very dangerous place. The problem is, and the thing that the Americans have to consider, it's if we want to give them the time, and maybe 2-3 months even, it's enough.
And that's what many are saying, that this is an Iranian ploy just to buy that time, just to give themselves a few more months. Yeah.
They have to be tough with them. They have to consider everything, every step of the Iranians. If they talk about indirect negotiation and Americans talk about direct, it's important not because it's not important, but it's very important not to negotiate about that with the Iranians, and not to be softer with them, because if you're softer with the first step, you will lose in that next steps.
There's definitely a lot of a different team at play here with the Trump administration than we saw under President Obama, obviously. Look, there's a presence right now, I'd argue, of a really credible military option. You know, whether it be the revelation of B-2s on the runways, missile systems being moved around, that had been so degraded under previous U.S. administrations. Is that a key part of the story right now? Is it bringing Iran to the table also, or what's the influence of this credible military threat?
Sure, it's a very...
And Israel involved. We have to mention, obviously, the Israelis involved in that picture.
We bring a lot of information in that place and on the table for the Americans, and a lot of cooperation. But that threat is real, it's on the table for the Iranians. It even reminds them the end of Iran-Iraq war, when in '88, even Americans from Diego Garcia Island, they bombed the Iranian Navy and some oil facilities. It frightens them. It's a very good step, but it has to be serious, not just be there, but to give them some hints that we are going to use them maybe 15 minutes after your refusal. Maybe, yes, it should be very serious, and not to be kind of soft or merciful toward Iranians, because when you give them 1 centimeter of merciness, they take it all.
After President Trump's strike on Qasem Soleimani in Iraq,
exactly.
I think there's some real credibility to that happening. Look, Iran this week making some news out of exporting missiles to Iraq. Again, this is a huge Security Council violation before the eyes of the world. What's the Ayatollah doing? Is he trying to appear to be a potent regional actor still? And what's the game there with shipping missiles right now to Iraq?
Yes. You know, Iranians can, if I say it's one sentence about nuclear program, they can give up many things, many issues in the nuclear program, but they cannot give up any inch in the terror program with the proxies. Yes, they lost a lot of power in this program of terror
regionally. There was a lot of complaints about the JCPOA in 2015.
Yes.
It didn't address any of that regional behavior.
But they cannot give up, and they cannot not giving missiles or arms or training or money to Hezbollah, to the Iraqi militias. They cannot give up, because the day that they stop that, the Iranian revolution is not the same. IRGC, they lose their spirit. So,
but they haven't lost it already? There's still some skin in this game to be saved?
No. Unless the Iranian regime falls, we will have these militias and these proxies every day, every hour, because it's in their blood. Without these militias, without IRGC working on it, you don't have the main thing, the main core of the revolution inside Iran.
Look, on the Israeli concerns, I mean, you're grounded here, and if you get one more thought out of you on this, Israel's clearly concerned about any kind of deal that President Trump might cut at this point. and leave that regime intact, which I think from the Israeli side now, I think there's been a clarity that can't remain. As long as that regime is in place, there will never be peace for Israel here. At least I think I'm summing up that position well from the Israeli side. How do you factor in those Israeli concerns on top of, is Israel more concerned about Trump right now or about the Ayatollah?
I think, we are in the real world. We cannot have all. It's not about 100%. We have to maybe a little bit compromise also. But we can take out many parts of the nuclear program out of Iran, maybe even talk about the terror issues. It's, Americans are still ruling in Iraq. We have to talk also about that. So we can take, maybe not as a whole, but we can take maybe 90% all the materials. We can take all the uranium enriched to Russia. We can take the centrifuges. We can having
a diplomatic solution here to with the regime that refers to us as a form of Satan.
When the gun is on the table and the remaining of the regime is on the table or not, the stability, because the Iranian people are also ready to rebel. If President Trump make it real, so it can be a very good threat against the regime, and they can compromise about the technology. So let's go together and not split. I think Israelis can be wise. Yes, we have to show the teeth, we have to show the strength, but what can we say? The first man of the world is making negotiation.
I'd agree for Israel not to go rogue against the United States, yes, against the Trump administration. Ben Sapi, fascinating subject. Definitely have a lot more to talk about in the next week on this one. Thank you for being with us in the studio.
You.
Now, as we move on here, the Israel Defense Force is gradually moving into key zones of the Gaza Strip and launching strikes on Hamas targets throughout the enclave. One strike targeting a senior Hamas official, killing more than 20 people in central Gaza today, according to local reports. While in the backdrop, the IDF presented its detailed investigation into the attack on Sderot. It's a town home to some 38,000 residents pre-war, with all the painful revelations of the invasion of October 7th. Now, as the soldiers stake out their positions in the corridors of Gaza, though, as we speak, here's Defense Minister Israel Katz today.
I came here today to strengthen the hands of my IDF commanders and soldiers who are fighting resolutely for the release of the hostages and the destruction of Hamas's power. The IDF is eliminating terrorists, locating and thwarting terrorist infrastructures, and dismembering the Gaza Strip, even in places like the Morag Axis, where we have not operated to date. Many areas are being seized and annexed to the security zones of the State of Israel, leaving Gaza smaller and more isolated. If Hamas continues its refusal and does not release the hostages soon, the IDF will engage in intense fighting throughout Gaza until the hostages are released and Hamas is defeated.
And we go to our correspondent, Robert Swift. He's down in southern Israel today as we look at this. Robert, let's start on looking at the situation. The latest reports about the expanded IDF, quote-unquote, buffer zones in Gaza. What's being revealed?
Right, so we've seen previously in the last week or so that the IDF is setting up the Morag corridor, essentially cutting Khan Yunis from Rafah, both in the south of Gaza. Now, additionally to that, a couple of weeks back, the IDF issued evacuation notices for the city of Rafah, one of the biggest evacuation orders it's given to date. Now, today in the Israeli media, there's been reports that, in fact, the intention of the IDF and the actions that's been taken on the ground in the last few days is to essentially add the entirety of the city of Rafah to the buffer zone, that being the area that the IDF has created, which is pretty much bulldozed and many flattened in order to keep a gap between Gaza and the Israeli communities on this side of the border. Now, we asked the IDF to confirm those reports and to give us any information on it. They didn't directly address them, and they didn't mention Rafah by name, but what they did say is that the IDF is destroying terrorist infrastructure, maintaining a broad military presence in the security zone adjacent to Israel, and working to remove threats in the area. And so what does appear to be happening here, if these reports are confirmed, is that essentially the IDF is taking more and more terrain, more and more land from Hamas. The Prime Minister has said in recent weeks that if Hamas doesn't release hostages, then more territory will be seized from Hamas. And this appears potentially to be what's happening here.
Rob, another element story. I see you're there positioned strategically, importantly, in front of the new police station in Sderot here, rebuilt since it was completely destroyed on October 7th. You know, the Sderot report here, there's some tough revelations that really highlight the failures of the security establishment, the army on that day.
Yeah, look, a lot of this is stuff that we all sort of instinctively knew, but to see it put out in detail is obviously something else. Now, the bottom line of the report is that the IDF didn't do its job to protect the residents of Sderot, and partly that was due to the fact that they had never anticipated a scenario where Hamas would conduct an assault against an Israeli city, the report said. Now, some of the findings in it, the city itself didn't have any form of perimeter around it, despite its close proximity to Gaza. This enabled Hamas simply to drive into the city, as many of us remember from the videos that morning. Now, as troops were rushing south to get to the Gaza envelope area, many of them actually came into Sderot, which ended up in the situation where most of the combat inside Sderot had been finished by about 10:30 in the morning, but more and more troops kept coming into the city. That, due to the fog of war, which was caused by the collapse of the Gazan division's command and control, meant that many of these units had come into the city looking to help, but unaware that they were needed further south in many of the communities of kibbutzim where massacres and abductions were taking place. Additionally, the local security team in Sderot, the report said they were under-equipped and that they had not received formal training in the last 2 years prior to the attack. Additionally, the report noted that many of the residents, Sderot being a fairly religious city, many of the residents, while they were aware that rocket alarms were taking place because they could hear the sirens in the streets, they weren't aware that it was more of an escalated security threat, that Hamas were inside the city itself, because as people that keep the Sabbath, they didn't have their phones on.
There's really brutal revelations all around there on Sderot. Robert Swift coming to us from the town. Thank you. Rerun, coming to the studio on this, talking about these big buffer zones now, that large buffer zones that the IDF appears to be looking to gain control over. From your perspective, what's it look like the Army's out to do right now, preparing to do? What's happening with this operation?
Well, the end game is not clear. The Army did declare, the Minister of Defense did declare that the real purpose is really to create enough pressure in order to get a better deal, or to get a deal at all with Hamas. But Hamas wouldn't go for like a full deal unless we have some end game, and it's clear what's the end game and what's the day after of Gaza. And this is the dilemma where the forces are in. So in the meantime, they are dismantling weaponry or killing Hamas operatives and taking territories. But of course, in the end, we have to understand that the horns of the dilemma. We don't want to occupy Gaza. We don't want to be the occupying power of Gaza, because we have to take the full responsibilities of the civil life of Gaza, as we did in the past. And it's a memory that we don't want to reenact right now, most of us. I mean, some people in the government feel differently. So I think we'll have to see. The government and the Minister of Defense and the Army would have to decide quickly, and it has to go hands in hand with the possibility of a deal, hostage deal. What's the end game of this maneuvering?
So many of us asking that question around here. Yes, Polio, on the side.
Yeah, maybe I have some speculation about what could be the end game here. The buffer zone that we now see between the Philadelphia corridor and the Mirage corridor is a very wide area that can actually station the Gazans. Because if we remember a few weeks ago, there has been a report about a reasonable way of conducting this war, which is separating the civilians in Gaza between the civilians and the Hamas militants and the other Palestinian faction. If that happens, that's a real, of course, pressure on Hamas. If the IDF is able to actually control the whole area of Rafah, station troops in the Murad corridor, inspect every civilian that comes back to that area, they can separate actually between the civilians and the militants. This way, they can also, of course, through the Rafah crossing and the other crossings from Israel, get aid inside that place. Remember that yesterday there has been some reports about the aid entry that could be resumed to the Gaza Strip. There has been some also ambiguity about that, but the Prime Minister's office said that we will conduct this war in accordance with international law. It means that they're not planning to starve Gazans to death. Yeah. This could be it. This could be the plan after all.
Yeah, but we should remember that no war ends with killing all your enemy operatives. So if this is what the vision they have, this won't happen. So the question, there was proposed a few offers that maybe the leadership of Hamas in some contexts as part of a deal would be exiled. Right. They refused. We all remember the 82 predicament. I was there as a young officer with the PLO, and we did it before. Whether this is a vision which is possible under some pressure.
In the very beginning of this war, so many envisioned that it would somehow come to some kind of exchange.
If they isolate them, they can offer them, you either get out of Gaza or you just starve to death. That's the only.
All the types of things that we haven't seen successfully pulled off yet in this war in terms of the isolation of Hamas from the population and a plan to get rid of them. Thanks, gentlemen. Do stay with us, though. And on the topic of the aid, UN Secretary General Guterres, you rejected a new Israeli proposal to control supply deliveries into Gaza, saying that it risks, as he put it, quote, further controlling and callously limiting aid, close quote. So clearly unimportant that Hamas has built a local economy on UN supplies since October 7th. But with the topic back in focus now, our senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim has more from the State Department in the U.S.
The Israel Defense Forces announced plans to resume the delivery of humanitarian aid into Gaza, but the United Nations says it won't cooperate. COGAT, the IDF agency that coordinates aid, said it proposed to the UN last week a, quote, structured monitoring and aid entry mechanism for Gaza, one that would improve and enhance oversight and accountability and make sure aid is not diverted to Hamas. Israel cut off delivery of aid to the Strip in early March to pressure Hamas to release more hostages. But UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said on Tuesday that the UN won't cooperate with Israel on the resumption of aid delivery based on the parameters set by the IDF.
UN agencies and our partners are ready and determined to deliver. But Israeli authorities' newly proposed authorization mechanisms for aid delivery risk further controlling and callously limiting aid down to the last calorie and grain of flour. Let me be clear. We will not participate in any arrangement that does not fully respect the humanitarian principles: humanity, impartiality, independence, and neutrality. Unimpeded humanitarian access must be guaranteed, and humanitarian personnel must be given the protection that they are accorded under international law.
The United Nations says that the food situation in Gaza is dire and approaching famine levels. Previous claims of famine by UN officials earlier in the war were found to have been based on faulty and misleading data by an internal review committee of a food security agency that partners with the UN. No UN agency would confirm that a famine had ever taken place after repeated inquiries last month by I-24 News. Asked by I-24 News at the U.S. State Department press briefing on Tuesday about whether the U.S. might step in to fill the void the UN would be leaving, spokesperson Tammy Bruce inferred the situation is too volatile.
The reason there's aid issues and movement issues in Gaza is because of the resumption of the conflict. So I know we work through our partners on the ground. The fact is that if it was safe to move aid through Gaza, it would move. And at this point, that's clearly an assessment that it hasn't been safe. So I'm not going to speak about or presume to talk about what the State Department would do. Those are the decisions of the Secretary and of the President, of the highest levels of this government, about how to move through that framework. So that's not something that I'll speculate on.
Israeli Foreign Affairs Ministry spokesman Oren Marmerstein stated on Tuesday that, quote, there is no shortage of humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip, unquote. He noted over 25,000 aid trucks entered the Strip in the 42 days of the most recent ceasefire and accused Hamas of using the aid to, quote, rebuild its war machine. He also chided Guterres for failing to call for Hamas to step down from power and for not acknowledging the ongoing unprecedented anti-Hamas protest in the Strip. He said, quote, as always, you don't let the facts get in the way when spreading slander against Israel, unquote. Reporting here from the U.S. State Department in Washington, Mike Wagenheim, I-24 News.
Now, the president of Indonesia has made the apparently bold decision to announce that his country is ready to temporarily take in Gazans impacted by the ongoing wars. Indonesia aims to renew its role as a benefactor to the enclave. Now, our correspondent Nicole Zedek has that story.
Before jetting off to the Middle East, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto made a major announcement about the war in Gaza, and a surprising one.
Kami siap mengevakuasi.
We are ready to evacuate those who are injured, traumatized, and orphaned. Whoever is recommended by the Palestinian Authority who wants to be evacuated to Indonesia, we are ready to send planes to transport them.
Yang terkait di situ.
Temporarily taking in displaced Gazans. A statement from the president that comes only 2 months after Indonesia's foreign ministry said Indonesia strongly rejects any attempt to forcibly displace Palestinians or alter the demographic composition of the occupied Palestinian territory. A response to U.S. President Donald Trump's idea of moving Palestinians out of Gaza and creating the Riviera of the Middle East. It's a plan Trump once again discussed with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during his impromptu trip to Washington.
And the president put forward a vision, a bold vision, which we discussed as well, including the countries that might be amenable and are amenable to accepting Palestinians of their free choice if they choose to go there.
It's recently been reported that Jerusalem is negotiating with several countries on the plan to relocate Gazans. But Indonesia is likely not one of those, as the two countries lack diplomatic ties. But something both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Subianto are outwardly agreeing on is that this move won't be forced on anyone.
We're expecting to evacuate about 1,000 victims in the first batch under one condition, that everybody should agree on it and that they would be in Indonesia temporarily until they have fully recovered from their injuries and the situation in Gaza is safe for their return.
The president embarked on a week-long visit to the Middle East to try and gain support for this plan from the UAE, Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, and Jordan, as the country with the world's largest Muslim population seeks to have a stronger say in the ongoing conflict.
Now, in stark contrast to the Biden administration's policies, Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, he's been invited to the United States for April 20th to meet with administration officials. And we have Balir Sledi in the studio on this one. Balir, what's set to happen? who's he going to meet? What does this visit look like?
Yes, well, after effectively he was boycotted by the Biden administration, now we see that the National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir is going to visit the U.S. later this month, specifically just right after the Passover holiday on April 20th. He's going to hold meetings with several White House officials, Trump administration officials. That's including his counterpart, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. His visit, by the way, is going to be very long. He's planning to take 6 days in the U.S. That will actually be devoted for meetings with the Jewish communities there. AIPAC officials, apparently, many of the Israeli supporters in the U.S., many of the groups there, and he's also set to give speeches during this time. So it's going to be a long visit that will include lots of developments. But let's be clear here. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, after being boycotted by the Biden administration now, this is apparently, of course, a shift in the policy by the U.S., but we're talking about a national security minister. His position is an internal position. It's not a dramatic, or a significant U.S.-Israeli relation thing. It's not going to be, it's not going to have an effect on the relations after all. But definitely, for internal purposes, Ben-Gvir can say right now that have legitimacy from the Trump administration. After all, by the way, he's not the only one from the right-wing politicians all over the world that are getting legitimacy from the Trump administration. He can come back to Israel saying that I was invited by the Homeland Security, Secretary of Homeland Security, and of course that will help him internally in Israel.
No doubt, a big deal on the political pedestal. But thanks on that. Now, as the tariffs imposed by the U.S. take hold, and we should mention at this moment, just emerged that President Trump is putting a 90-day pause on most of those tariffs. We have to look at the Israeli shekel, though, which has resumed its slide against the world's major currencies. Yesterday, the Bank of Israel set the shekel dollar rate at 3.76 shekels to $1, a significant drop from the previous week. Experts say the declines reflect, first and foremost, the U.S. administration's new tariffs and the renewed confrontation, which doesn't appear to be going anywhere between the U.S. and China. Now, U.S. import taxes on Chinese goods have gone to some 125% per the president's latest tweet. And the flurry of moves has heightened fears that the trade war could lead to a global recession. But on our local concerns here, first and foremost, we are now joined by Dr. Gali Ingber, the head of the Department of Finance at the Faculty of Business Administration, joining us. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. Look, first, on the big picture, and I guess the news of just the last 5 minutes here, as President Trump has tweeted on this, China and the U.S. still to be appear to be, climbing higher into the tree, so to say, only escalating this trade war. What does that mean for the rest of us, those billions of us not involved?
Okay, so first of all, we see what happens right now, as you said, the last few minutes, when Trump says the tariffs are going to be paused for 90 days for many countries, maybe except China. So first of all, we see stock market volatility because of all this trade war. We see the market is going down by 5 to 6% for the last 3 or 4 days, and now it's going up 5, 6, maybe more than that, just because he said he's going to postpone the tariffs for 90 days. So first of all, market volatility, and it affects all of us because we save in the stock market, and our pension is saved over there, and other long-term savings and investment. So that's first of all. Second of all, we are talking about the currency fluctuations because money and capital seeks safe haven at times like this. We can expect potential slower growth globally. Because, if every country is going to produce for itself right now, instead of having a free trade, then it's going to cause a slow global economy for sure of 2 to 3%. We're talking about potential higher inflation in a lot of economies. We're going to see supply chain disruptions and increased costs. And we're going to see reduced variety of products because of supply chain adjustments. So it's going to affect all of us for sure.
None of that sounds good here. Look on the Israeli situation with the shekel rate now, the currency rate being so affected. Despite all of that this week, the Bank of Israel, the governor came out and said he's not overly concerned about the depreciation of Israel's currency right now, saying that they have no plans for intervening. Is that a logical position at this point?
I guess so. I think so. I guess the Bank of Israel is not keen on, jumping in and intervening. I guess it sees the depreciation of the shekel right now as something temporary and within acceptable boundaries. We have to remind ourselves that a weaker shekel benefits Israeli export sector, and Israeli goods are becoming more attractive and more competitive worldwide because of that. Okay. I think the Bank of Israel believes the market forces will correct itself and the shekel will go back up soon. And I think it might want to conserve foreign exchange reserves to more critical timing, critical situation. So I guess it's relatively understandable. I wouldn't jump in to intervene right away. I would wait and see what happens.
Well, thank you very much for this so far, as we're, like so many around the world, struggling to keep up with the developments around this, especially as they affect us here in our little slice of the planet in Israel. Thank you, Dr. Gali Ingber.
Thank you very much.
And to bring us back to the issues sitting so heavily on Israeli hearts, at least 59 Israeli hostages remain in Gazan captivity. That's as we near the Jewish holiday of Passover, and it hangs heavily over all of us in this small country. 24 of them are thought to still be alive in Israel. has received proof of life for at least 20 of those hostages since the start of the war, a few recently. That's according to the Hostages and Missing Families Forum. That's the leading civil group immersed in the moment. Now we go to Emily Francis, our correspondent who's out at Hostage Square tonight in Tel Aviv. Now, Emily, how do you describe these latest expressions of grief, anxiety, pain that are so apparent at Hostage Square? Those exasperated with the Israeli government seem to be openly pleading to President Trump now?
Yeah, 100%. You know, we've seen the images, we've heard, from Aviva and Keith Siegel and Yair Horn, of course, who were with President Trump yesterday, thanking him, saying we would not be alive if it weren't for you. So at least we're entering Passover with, a sense of the return hostages, with that sense of hope that we'll get all the hostages back. But at the same time, how do you count on anything? I mean, there is no forward movement right now as far as a hostage deal. We are getting into Passover, the second Passover now of this nightmare, the second Passover since October 7th, with many families, of course, not home. How do you celebrate exile? How do you, to look at how history has repeated itself? We use the Passover story as the original Never Again, yet here we are again. So people are sad, obviously speaking. This Saturday, they are going to have a big Seder event here tonight. As you can see, pretty quiet. We are in the middle of the week. People trying to rest. People trying to, process the feelings that we're getting into Passover once again without any kind of resolution, and just sheer exhaustion. And we haven't heard a lot from the hostage families here locally. They seem to be keeping a lower profile in spite of the circumstances, not wanting to, do anything that would get in the way of trying to find another solution to bringing the hostages home.
Now, you mentioned that Passover Seder, the big meal set to take place there. I recall the one last year, right, with the big table of empty seats. I mean, it's mad that we're circling back around to these events again and utilizing them in this moment. Emily Francis, thanks for coming to us from Hostage Square. Another bit of local news here, and I believe you're coming to you on this, that the Israeli Security Cabinet is meeting tonight. Again, the issues of the hostage, everything they could be discussing right now, but tonight, significantly, it's happening without the presence of the country's top security officials. What's going on behind that story?
Yes, well, before his flight back to Tel Aviv, back to Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu called the ministers and told them that we are meeting right after his court hearing today. So it should be also this evening. And they have said in that statement that it's a cabinet meeting. So it is, or should actually be, with the other heads of the security establishment in Israel, but we see that only the ministers are invited. That is connected to, apparently, the fact that the High Court in Israel yesterday issued an order to actually invite the head of the Shabak, Ronen Bar, that the government wants to fire, of course, but they are saying at the High Court that until there is a solution for this issue, he should be invited. So apparently the government right now doesn't want to invite anyone of the security establishment because they don't want to invite Ronen Bar specifically. It doesn't matter where you are, after all, in Israel politically, on the political spectrum. It is a state in the middle of the war. We are more than a year and a half in war, and the infighting in Israel and the political aspect of every single thing that we talk about is something that, of course, is not helping, to say the least. And this is another unfortunate reality that we're in as well.
Leo, thanks for the updates around that. Look at, yes, Sderot on the subject.
I think it's an accident. We have to be frank with the audience. The tension between the political echelon and the military.
It's been a big theme in the streets too. A lot of demonstrations and protests recently.
This is really, and the fact in this meeting, this cabinet meeting, without the head of the army, the head of the Shabak, the head of the Mossad, this is a very strange scenario, and I think a very alarming scenario. Whatever position you have, in the end, some of the political leaders, take Ben-Gvir for example, they think they actually can direct the forces underneath and the police without going through the leadership of those organizations. And this would never work. It never worked in the past. We have to be very careful, very alarming. The Israeli public is very torn on those issues. this tension or mistrust between the public echelon and the security echelon has to be resolved.
It's damaging. It's damaging in the small
damaging
country,
for sure.
No matter what your position, of course. I have another issue for you, Rerun, in just a minute here. During operations in the West Bank town overnight, in a Palestinian town, the Israel Defense Force, they say they demolished the home of the Palestinian gunman who killed the soldier in a sniper attack last year. No, that was March 22nd, 2024. Yes. Mujahid Barakat Mansour. He opened fire on civilians and soldiers near the settlement of Dolev. He killed Israeli Defense Force Sergeant First Class Eli David Garfinkel, and he wounded several other soldiers there. Now, he was killed, the attacker, in a helicopter strike after an hours-long exchange of fire with soldiers. But on this note there, the IDF, as we have all the reports tonight, expanding operations in Nablus, the large city in the northern West Bank right now. And Rerun, we'll get your thoughts on this. This is a front that I don't want to say we overlook, but that, with this major distractions out there as we talk about Lebanon and Gaza and everything else, the West Bank, a critical arena, so close to home for so many Israelis. And now the IDF stepping back in there. What do you make of the tactical positioning? What's the IDF up to?
No, I mean, in the West Bank and in the northern Samaria, like Nablus or Jenin, the IDF is working constantly because they really have to contain terror. People should understand how narrow Israel is, and it's a few kilometers from those places into the heart of Israel. So this is where the IDF has a great focus. I think the campaign in Gaza we have to take into account and think of an end game because we are spread so thin. We have the political tension. We have a public that wants to see the hostages back. There are many decisions here that are at the forefront. And the army is doing whatever it can, but in the end we have to have a clear policy. And I should refer again to the campaign in the north. I think the campaign of the north should be a good example to how a military campaign should be conducted with a measured end game, with a clear sight, with fine distinction. Yeah. I think we do the same thing, I think, in northern Samaria, but in Gaza, we have to have a clear destination. And I think we might find ourselves too soon, too early, or not too soon, whatever, in a situation in which, in the end, we'll be the occupying power in Gaza. And then this is a scenario of years, and I don't think the scenario we want to be there. So all those things of doing half occupation of Gaza would never work. So I would say it's a warning, and I think the army would be very alert to those issues and would bring it back to the political echelon up.
Yes, but a lot of people look at the West Bank model as a sort of a successful one for the IDF in terms of maintaining a grip on terror. What are your thoughts? Is this expanding?
I just wanted to add something that some Palestinians are talking about in the West Bank, which is the fact that the IDF is focused actually on the camps in Jenin, beside Jenin, beside Tulkarem, beside Shechem, beside all these areas. And this is very important because they are sensing that the IDF wants to eliminate the refugee issue. The fact that there are people that evacuated to those camps and they are living in those camps in a very poor position, a very dire situation, means that there will always be a lot more violence coming from those places. That's why they are thinking and they're sensing that the IDF wants to deal with this issue, Israel in general.
Doron Avital, thanks for being with us. A whole list of topics. Thank you, gentlemen. Now, it's been 5 months, as we've detailed, since the Israel and Hezbollah ceasefire went into force. But many of the villages along the border with Lebanon in Israel are yet to see residents fully return, now, despite all the promises of the security establishment. Our correspondent Robert Swift toured that area with the IDF to see just what measures are there to reassure local residents.
The Israeli village of Shtula is a victim of geography. It sits upon a hill, meters from the Lebanese border.
Here you can understand the challenge. You can see Zarit or Shtula, a community that we want to prosper, that sits on the border. And on the other side, you can see Lebanon.
During the fighting between the IDF and Hezbollah, Shtula was one of the communities most targeted by anti-tank missiles.
We have to set a defensive plan that will enable us to bring civilians back and be ready for a Hezbollah attack.
Most of the village's residents are yet to return, despite the relative quiet that holds over Israel's northern frontier. Next door, in another house damaged by missile fire, one resident had returned temporarily to the home where he was married and raised 2 children.
For now, we are renting an apartment that is 2.5 kilometers further from the border. We're there for now, until life returns to normal and peace is restored, which is the most important thing. Then we will bring the children back here with pleasure. Definitely.
Yaakov was home just long enough to conduct repairs and collect a few items, but he said he had a message for his Lebanese neighbors in their own language.
اوعك ما انتوا حضرتوا الاكل اللي اكلته عشان تفهموا بدكم خلاص اقعدوا على السكت.
Across from Shtula, one of the IDF's remaining positions inside Lebanon is visible.
5 posts in Lebanon.
Each of them are about the same size?
About the same size. Our posts in Lebanon are tactical posts. Their main mission is to better or fortify the defenses of the communities on the border.
Built on high ground, they act as watchtowers along the length of the border. Last month, Defense Minister Israel Katz said the army will remain in these locations indefinitely, though Colonel Razili said that the IDF hopes the Lebanese army deploying to the area will remove the need for the outposts. We depart Shtula, travelling to a nearby IDF base where in the early months of the war, I-24 News witnessed fierce clashes between the army and Hezbollah.
On the hill behind me where you can see the smoke, that appears to be a vehicle or something else that's been struck by a Hezbollah anti-tank weapon.
Tanks and infantry maintain their guard on the border, a manpower requirement impacting conscripts and reservists alike.
There's something about this war that wears you down. We joined the army very young and entered something difficult and unexpected. In the process, we discover new challenges. But as Ace said, we overcome everything out of a sense of commitment that a few years ago others stood here in our place. Today it's our turn, and we're here to ensure peace and protection for the residents of the North.
We understand there's a different mindset that we need to change in our heads. We're used to quick wars or quick maneuvers, a month or two or whatever. All the wars Israel has had since '48 were pretty quick. We understand that we're here for a marathon run for a long time. It's very tough for the military, for the reserves specifically.
Nearby, the Lebanese village of Aita Shab stands, half its buildings in ruins. The IDF didn't permit us to film the village, but we were able to observe it, just long enough to spot the Hezbollah flag flying there.
There's a difference in southern Lebanon between villages that are Christian, Shiite, and Sunni. The Shiite villages, you call them villages, we call them terror bases. Every house that we went in, every school, every mosque, there was a school or infirmary and a weapons cache.
But the Shiite villages, the IDF has demolished them?
Not completely. We didn't demolish a village. We went and targeted locations that we found weapons, ammunition, military infrastructure.
Shtula is just one of the many Israeli villages along the border disrupted by the war with Hezbollah. Some have bounced back faster, with businesses opening and children returning to school. Others, like Shtula, remain semi-populated, their residents waiting to see if the calm really has returned.
That brings us to the end of the broadcast here tonight. We try to cover the array of the top stories facing us in and around Israel. For now, you've been watching The Rundown, again coming to you live from Tel Aviv here on I-24 News. I'm David Matlin. Wherever you are in the world, thanks for joining us. We'll see you again in the hours and days to come.
1900年徐家汇分上海是三台合一的，其中包括昆山路距离上海15英里的佘山。从图中可以明显的看出，自上世纪90年代起，徐家汇站的温度一直。
The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on I24 News.
Welcome to Jewish World Weekly on I24 News. I'm Emily Francis. Each week, we're focusing on stories, issues, and personalities of Jewish interest here in Israel, as well as throughout the diaspora, or also called the global Jewish community. And we start with our top 5 items in the Jewish world, presented by our very own Nicole Zedek. Hi, Nicole.
Thanks, Emily. Here are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. The Israeli National Security Council warns Iranian agents may try and target Jewish and Israeli tourists over Passover. This comes as people linked with Iranian proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamist terror groups Al-Qaeda and ISIS have seen a spike in activity around Europe. But the National Security Council actually singled out Australia and Canada as they've seen an uptick in anti-Semitic incidents in recent months. 3 Uzbek citizens have been sentenced to death for the murder of Chabad Rabbi Tzvi Kogan in the UAE. The Moldovan Israeli emissary was abducted in Dubai last November, and his body was found days later. Israeli security officials claim the attackers were sent by Iran, but this hasn't been confirmed quite yet. Jewish residents of Djerba, a small island off the coast of Tunisia, have protested the arrest of a man who was sentenced to 7 years in jail. Social media footage shows members of Djerba's 2,000-strong Jewish population trying to break into a police station after rumors spread that this arrest was related to the Israel-Hamas war. The Tunisian Jewish Community Authority denies this, saying it was in relation to a car-burning incident several years ago. Randy Fine, a strong Trump backer, won the race for congressman in Florida's 6th district after a special election was called since the previous congressman, Mike Waltz, resigned to become national security advisor. It was a tense and surprisingly close campaign where Fine, who calls himself the Hebrew Hammer, beat his Democrat opponent Josh Weil with 56% of the vote. And finally, London's Tate Art Gallery has returned a rare 17th century painting back to the descendants of its original owners after it was looted by the Nazis in the 1940s. The Henry Gibbs painting from 1654, Aeneas and his family fleeing burning Troy, was brought by the gallery from Belgium in the 1990s. It originally belonged to Belgian art collector Samuel Hartveld, who fled to the United States in 1940 to avoid Nazi persecution. Well, now the painting is back in the hands of his great-grandchildren. Those are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Back to you, Emily.
He's a comedian and actor turned Jewish activist and, of course, longtime podcast host who is not afraid to ruffle a few feathers with his rants. Michael Rappaport has been to Israel several times since October 7th to offer his support and much more. And this time he was front and center in Hostages Square.
Even when I'm not here, a piece of my heart lives here. This fight for the hostages has become deeply personal. And over the last 18 months, I've had the honor of meeting and getting to know some of the families whose lives have been shattered and destroyed by this war. And it has been impossible for me not to see my own family in them. When I met the family of Shlomo, Mansour, and Oded Lifshitz, I saw my grandfather in them. When I met and spoke to Orlevy's brother Michael, I saw my own brother. When Rachel and John told me about their son Hirsch, I couldn't imagine my own young adult sons.
Wow, and we're so happy to have him here in the studio. Michael, you are so amazing. Listen, it just brings tears to my eyes hearing your compassion and to be here, even with a hoarse voice, as we just heard. The fact that you have been not only fighting against the narrative, but being supportive of the hostage families is so important. So what was it like being there this time, given that we've started the war again and we still have many that are still there?
I mean, I don't think it was any different. I think the families and the whole country are exhausted, concerned, deeply, deeply concerned, and confused and demoralized. And, I feel like, to use like a sports analogy, like we get to the 1-yard line and then somehow we're back at the, our own 30-yard line. And then we get to the 20-yard line and then somehow, it just keeps pushing and pulling and pushing.
And the sacks keep happening and the penalties.
And, my little part in this, I never imagined that 540 days they'd still have hostages. But I just can't imagine or think of not supporting, standing up, fighting. And I'm aware now of my voice in regard to this because there's so few voices, from Jews in the diaspora, Jews in Hollywood, Jews in show business that have been supporting. And I will not stop fighting on behalf of the 59 hostages and the sovereignty of Israel. It's of the utmost importance to me, and the safety and the respect of Jews in New York and all around the country. But I'm a New Yorker, to see what, has been going on in New York is so mind-boggling.
It's one of those things because I, too, as you know, lived in New York a long time, and it was never a thing. I mean, New York is a melting pot. No one is afraid of walking the streets and taking the subway. So the fact that it has changed so drastically I just, for you to see stuff, do you say something now when you see people like?
I mean, I've never.
On corners wearing.
I haven't seen that in real life yet. Now, I don't go to these rallies, but I haven't had any. The thing that I see the most, that resonated with me the most, is the ripping down of the posters. And I know that doesn't hurt anybody, but it hurts my soul throughout this period of time in Manhattan to see. You can name one. You know, the Bibas family being ripped down, I think, is the most shocking because it's a baby and a little kid. You know, it's an entire family. So that one, but you know, whether it's, I mean, I can name, I've seen it with my own eyes. I take photographs of it because it's so disrespectful and it's so hateful. It doesn't hurt physically, and it doesn't, you know, on the list of things that those people are going through, that's the bottom, but it's just sort of like it hurts your heart.
It's such a deep pain. It's not like, you know, an arm, you break an arm, it heals in a few weeks. This is just an ongoing trauma in and of itself. But for you to be advocating, I mean, have you had a lot of pushback? I mean, do you get threats, and are these something that like scares you or concerns you?
I mean, I get threats on social media, but I think if you don't get threats on social media, you're not doing social media right.
Yeah.
So I feel like, you know, I've always gotten threats, you know, whether it was, you know, stuff about politics. I've always gotten threats on social media. Those don't concern me. You know, I've had, you know, comedy shows, protests. That doesn't concern me. You know, there's been, how do I say it? There's been some issues in terms of getting jobs as an actor.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really showing.
Yes. However, I don't have the slightest bit of regret. There was no choice. Well, if you do this, this is going to happen, or if you do this, this won't happen. Being supportive of Jews, being supportive of Israel, being supportive of our people was not a choice. It was very, and it is very natural and organic to me.
Tell me, you mentioned in the beginning, you know, when you were, you know, on the stage in Hostage Square, that you see these families, you see the Lipschitz families and whatnot. It reminds you of your grandfather and your brother. Did you know your grandfather?
Yes.
And tell us a bit about him.
I mean, I knew all my grandparents. You know, they passed away when I was young, but you know, these are, you know, New York Jews, Russian Jews. You know, they were definitely New Yorkers. And, you know, whether it's the family of Shlomo Mansour, who, you know, I have his mustache.
Yeah.
You know, or, you know, hearing, like I said, you know, John and Rachel talk about their son, or Michael Levy talk about his brother, or I mean, the endless conversations and moments that I've had. I think, as a Jewish man, as a Jewish person, it came very clear to me that no matter who, what you support, what you think, what you post, if you had been here on October 7th, you too could have been murdered, killed, raped, or kidnapped. All these things became very clear to me. So when you see the family of Omer Nutra, you see the family of Omer Shemtov, when you see the family of Eden Alexander, these are New Yorkers in New Jersey. These are people, they sound just like I do. Ruby Chen, his son Itai Chen. That just, all these experiences they just resonate with me.
And
the Americans really.
That's the thing in the States. How disappointing is it for you? I've experienced that, to see people that you've worked with or know, knowing that they're not
let me tell
with
you,
us. I imagine that also feels like a betrayal.
The show business, actors, actresses, musicians, part of it is, again, it doesn't affect me on a daily basis, except for I have to work with these people, and there's so many people that I have lost respect for, and there's so many people that present themselves as empathetic. There's so many people that as sympathetic, as worldly, as compassionate, and as they like to read, and they like to read about poetry, and they like to read about the world, and they're completely full of shit. They're completely full of shit. And some of them are Jewish, and some of them are not Jewish. And it's been an existential career thing. It's not existential to my life, but like, you know, it's been like a, you know, you sort of start to go like, these are my peers? Not all of them.
Well, and it seems like a lot is a lie.
There's a lie.
There's a lie based in this.
And there is a lie, and it's frustrating because of the presentation that they show themselves. They care about animals, and they cry about pigs and cows. Cool. They cry about this cause and that cause, but you haven't in 540-something days educated yourself that you have. You take the time to sign a letter for this documentary filmmaker who was probably doing another documentary, who was allegedly throwing rocks at the IDF. If it had been another Academy Award winner from this past year throwing rocks at a New York City policeman, there wouldn't be no uproar. Be like, what the f is this guy doing? Throwing rocks at the police or LAPD. But because they just run, so that part of it has been. That part of it, for me personally, has been something that I'm trying to wrangle with.
Yeah, I think we all are. Even a year and a half later, it's like a whole new matrix reality, whatever you want to call it. Michael, it's so amazing to see you, and thank you for continuing to be a voice and for coming here when you're in Israel and making it a priority, no matter what kind of backlash you face.
I appreciate.
Much appreciated.
I'm not going anywhere.
An interesting story from a place that we don't often hear much about, not only when it comes to Jewish history, but let alone discrimination towards a Jewish community post-October 7th. We're talking about Croatia, home to 8 synagogues, a population of around 5,000 people. Yet in the wake of the October 7th massacre and war against Hamas, the Croatian government has yet to act on pleas from the Jewish community to ensure their security. We are now joined via Zoom by Rabbi Pinchas Zaklos of the Menorah Chabad community of Croatia. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, and thank you for the interview.
Yes. So listen, we know that most of the world has been experiencing in the wake of October 7th, of course, ranging from protests to physical violence. But first, let's start with the Jewish community. Who knew there was so much history? What makes it unique prior to what happened on October 7th?
So the Jewish community in Croatia exists many, many years, even before the Second World War. It was 3 communities since 150 years ago. It was Sephardic, Ashkenazic, and Neologic community. Unfortunately, in the Holocaust, many Jews was killed. And after the Holocaust, many years, the community didn't have a rabbi. So what is make it unique is that even the 3rd generation doesn't know almost nothing about Judaism. So when we came here, we need to start from the beginning, from Aleph base, from the minimum knowledge about Judaism. We need to start to teach the community. And thank God, I could say we did a lot of good job, and we have, Baruch Hashem, thank God, a nice community.
Well, that's a testament to, of course, all of your hard work. You said being there for over 20 years. So let's talk about obviously what has happened, why you feel so threatened, not safe, insecure. What has the reaction been prior to, of course, writing this letter? Trying to get more security protection. But what has happened there specifically?
Okay, so let me just give you a short introduction. We are here for the last 20 years. We feel usually safe, but since the 7th of October, many people feel not safe in the city, especially in the city of Zagreb. We have a protest every few months, and we have people on the street that they are saying bad word about Jewish people. And we built a beautiful building, beautiful community, and there are some people, they don't want to come to the community because we don't have security. And people feel some kind of, since the 7th of October, they feel some kind of fear. So according to law, if we become a religious community, we have the right to get security. But so we decide to apply. We went through all the process. All what should be done to be able to get the status of the religious community. And it was almost 2 years ago. And unfortunately, we still didn't got this solution. Means that all this time we don't have security.
Wow. So this, you said 2 years ago, so this started even before October 7th, you were asking for this kind of recognition.
We start already before the October 7th, already people feel not comfortable. But, and we went to government, we turned to government, we asked, please help us. And he says, I'm sorry, we don't have enough people, we cannot help you. So we decide that the only way is to do it is to go through the Croatian law and to do all the process, and we did it. We're still waiting for solution.
So
and this is the reason.
Silence says a lot. I guess there's a lot of noise in silence. So also this letter, you're trying to bring it in a very professional, hopeful way of, hey, we're a group, we like security, and trying to get to the attention of President Trump. Is there any chance that will happen? What is it that you would hope in an ideal world the president would recognize?
We realize that without helping of outside of the country, we will not put pressure on the government. We will not be able to get any result. So I was speaking with Duvi Unig from the organization. It's called Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce. He's a very nice guy, and he decided to help us to speak with the government, and we sent a very emotional letter to the government of Trump, and few ministers and few senators already involved, and we hopefully that the pressure, and they understand our needs, they understand that Jewish people cannot have any problem to come to the synagogue and to keep Jewish life, and hopefully that this pressure on the Croatian government will make the results.
All right.
We'll be able to continue living a normal Jewish life.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Zaklos, and of course, keep up the good work. And it sounds like you've built quite a nice community. She's a British-Israeli playwright, screenwriter, comedian, director, actress, teacher, Renaissance woman, and now she's taken on the challenge of quite a lifetime and a career, especially during such challenging times. Hadar Galron is performing on stage in an autobiographical monodrama about Dr. Joseph Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, but this time with a twist. Take a look at a clip of Whistle.
Everyone knows that 6 million Jews were massacred in the Holocaust. But how many of the survivors actually lived? How many of the survivors could ever dare to love again? How many of the survivors were able to love their children? And how many of those children who grew up without love knew how to love? Tammy is just one of these children. Her mother was Dr. Mengele's secretary. Can Tammy overcome her childhood, shaded by the horrors of the Holocaust, and let herself live and love as she dreams?
And we're very happy to have Hadar Galron here in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you.
And very brave. I mean, brave enough to get on stage in a one-woman, one-act play, let alone so many different variations of characters and such a intense topic.
Yes.
So what made you decide you wanted to do this?
Well, actually, I began just with writing, with helping Yaakov Buchan, who is a book author, writer of many, many books. He's written like 19 books. And his mother was Mengele's secretary. And when he came to me and told me that, I just said, okay, so we need to write about her. He said, no, I've written about her. We need to write about the second generation. I want people to know that we are transparent children, that we were just born to be like to be like sponges for the pain of our parents. Nobody saw us. My mother didn't even think she could get pregnant, and that actually is kind of how the play begins.
Wow, yeah.
Where she says to her mom, she says, my mom, yeah, you know, the whole thing, I try to do it with as much humor as possible, although it is a drama. But, you know, it begins with people love, they say people love success stories, but really they prefer disasters, especially other people's disasters. And, you know, my disaster began even before I was born. My mother, from a really young age, she told me, who even thought I could get pregnant after everything I went through over there? So you must.
You heard that your whole life?
No, this is him, not me.
This is him. I was like, wait, your mother too? Yeah.
So she says, you must have been really happy, Mom. I was devastated. It was already the end of the war.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
This is a true story. It was the end of the war. We were kept in some camp, Ich weiß, in Austria. This is where I met your father. Both of us, we knew that we have nobody left from before the war. We stuck to each other like a bandage to a wound. This is how I got pregnant.
What a nice feeling.
Yes.
But still, I mean, amazing that he, was able to handle it enough to be able to write.
Well,
maybe writing was
70.
Maybe writing was also his outlet. But explain. Yes. So his mother literally was the secretary to Mengele.
Yes, and since I've been going around the world with this show, and I found out in many different audiences that Mengele had a Jewish Masua, that he had another Jewish secretary, that he had a Jewish woman to do his manicure, pedicure, and he had a Jewish doctor. And, a doctor who just finished medical studies, and after the war, he did not work one day as a doctor, of course. But I met his daughter. So I've been meeting these second generations in Canada, in Israel, in the Czech Republic, in Hungary, in, just all
around,
places.
Yeah.
As well as meeting many, many of the second generation. Because the second generation is not only what we think of the second generation. Can you imagine I came to perform in Vienna, and I say I, but it's we. First of all, when we went back to Austria, we were performing in front of an audience of second generation Jewish and non-Jews. And so at the end of the play, someone comes up to me and says, I was very touched by your play. I am also second generation. My father was a Wehrmacht soldier. And I'm like, wow, okay.
Wow.
My first thing is, what do you mean you're not second generation? But then he tells me his father was 19 years old when his two legs were decapitated, and he lost his youth. And you think of these young children, they sometimes don't know.
Right.
That they're on the wrong side.
Let's, because we're out of time. I want to hear. So you're performing, as we know, you've performed in Tel Aviv, and you're also on the way to
Tel Aviv.
Right, but you are performing in Tel Aviv, and you are right. But let's talk about the performance that you're going to be doing in Germany.
In Germany, in Weimar. First of all, it's the first time in Germany. For me, this is amazing to go to Germany with this play. And actually, the play in German, the translation, won a prize last week.
Wow.
Translated by Matthias Neumann, and so it's even before the plays arrived there. The festival that we will be performing at is a festival for 80 years to Auschwitz.
Wow.
So it's going to be like the closing play of the whole festival.
Talking about coming full circle, really incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Emily.
Now we want to end on a sweet and incredible story that happened right here in the land of Israel. What was supposed to be a day of family fun turned out to be much more for 3-year-old Ziv Nitzan when she discovered a rare archaeological find. Take a look.
From north to south, Israel is famously full of historical beauty and archaeological findings. Something that became very clear for 3.5-year-old Ziv Nitzan and her family when they took a trip to Tel Azika near Beit Shemesh, and the little girl discovered a rare archaeological artifact on the way.
אנחנו הלכנו בשביל כאן. זיו התכופפה בין כל 70,000 אבנים שהיו לידה, והרימה אבן, ואז היא שפשפה את החול, וראתה שמשהו שונה באבן.
A Canaanite scarab seal dating back approximately 3,800 years to the Middle Bronze Age.
זיו, זאתי שמצאה את החרפושית בתל הזקה, ממש על השביל הולכי רגל, ויצרו קשר עם רשות העתיקות, והנה אנחנו מעניקים להם תעודה, מודים מקרב לב, ותמשיכו כך.
This scarab amulet traces its origin to ancient Egypt, where beetles were seen as sacred symbols, embodying new life.
אנחנו מאוניברסיטת תל אביב חופרים את האתר הזה כבר כמעט 15 שנה. לכן הממצא הזה של חרפושית מצטרף להמון ממצאים מצריים וממצאים שנעשו כמו ממצאים מצריים. זה שמישהו שמטייל פה בתל ומוצא את זה, מעביר את זה לרשות העתיקות, בשיתוף פעולה של האוניברסיטה עם רשות העתיקות, זה חלק מכל המחקר והעבודה שנעשית פה כבר הרבה מאוד שנים.
The piece will be featured in a special Passover exhibit in Jerusalem, along with other ancient artifacts.
Thank you so much for watching.